Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about optimally or correctly setting the suspension settings on your FJR1300 ES specifically. Now the ES system, the electronic suspension, make no mistake, it is not about getting the best performance out of your bike. It is about comfort and convenience. It is actually at quite a disadvantage over the A model and especially over a higher end third-party suspension setup, because the limitations on the system mean you cannot physically set some of the things to where they absolutely need to be. Let me explain. First of all, we have some of the settings purely missing. They are not there. We have no compression adjustments, front or rear. It is what it is. Whether or not the valving is set or whether or not it's tied into the rebound dampening, which is what we can control, nobody knows. It's not in the book. The other major disadvantage is all the settings are linked front to rear. We have no separate controls. We have no separate valving or settings for anything front versus rear. So when we do set up what we do have available, we have to make a conscious choice. Are we setting for the front or are we setting for the rear? And that means that one way or the other, it is what it is for the other one. Now to do this right, you can do the front yourself if you're a big guy like me. For the rear, you're absolutely going to need a helper because you need someone to measure while you're sitting on the bike. This is very easy to do, and this is something you can do yourself in 5 minutes. It'll probably improve the ride of your bike depending on how far off you've been setting it, but don't mistake this for any kind of suspension tuning video or how to properly set up your motorcycle video. This is just about the FJR1300 ES and its limitations. Now the first thing you do on any bike is set its sag, which means how far down the bike compresses while you sit on it, just sitting there. On the front, unfortunately, we have nothing to do. The ES system does not have any front preload adjustment. So it is what it is. The preload on this bike only affects the rear shock. So there's really nothing you can do. Now I am with gear on 250 pounds, that's with the bags on the bike, and I get 1.5 inches of sag on the front. You measure this by measuring the total amount of travel from the bottom of your fork seal to where it lands down here. Doing it yourself, all you need to do is put a zip tie around here and measure how far it slides down after you sit on the bike. You subtract that from the total amount of suspension travel, and that's in the manual. And this calculated out to 1.5 inches. Now, like I said, there's no adjustment, so it is what it is. Luckily, pure luckily, that is a very good range. That's near the outside, that's about 38 millimeters of travel, and that is a very good street range for front or rear suspension sag. Now on the rear, this is where we actually get control electronically of the preload. This is shown on the dash through the single rider with luggage, two riders, and two riders with luggage displays. What we do here is measure from the bottom of the axle to a fixed point straight above. Now on my particular bike, I've got this Jivy 357 rack, so I've got this nice, easy black corner here to measure against. And we need to figure out, first of all, what our static sag is. That's just the weight of the bike pushing it down, if any. And that is going to depend on what preload setting you have. The ES version uses a dual rate spring in the back, and static sag is often 0 or barely anything. On this particular bike, it's only 1/8 of an inch set where I need it to. To find that, all you do is lift up on the bike and you'll feel the shock very quickly top out. And you're just looking for the difference between when you pull up and when it's just sitting there. Like I said, in this case, it's only 1/8 of an inch. So that's our starting point with our static sag. Here's where you need a helper. You need to get on the bike and then have that helper take the same measurement while you're on the bike in your gear. And yes, you have to take off the left side bag, so it's going to be you know, really, really close. An unladen bag is not that much. It's not going to really make that big of a difference. But as we'll soon find out, we can't adjust for that amount of difference anyway. So you get on the bike, give it a little bounce to let it settle, have your helper take the new measurement, subtract that from your total travel, and you have your sag, your rider sag. What we're looking for here is 30 to 40 millimeters, which is 1.25 inches to about 1.6 inches. So here comes some more of those ES limitations over a better setup manual suspension bike. We already talked about having no front preload whatsoever. On the rear, ideally, you're going to have a wide range of adjustments possible, and you're going to have a number of different settings in between that range to give you some fine-tuning ability. Unfortunately, with the ES, even though we do have a wide range of preloads to set, we only have 4 possible total adjustments. And to make matters worse, they're not even equally spaced in the range. We have 2 near the bottom and 2 near the top, with a big chunk right in the middle. Unfortunately, for some people, including myself, that chunk right in the middle is where we actually need and really want to be for the best suspension tuning. Now for me, on this bike, I usually ride with the bags, but nothing in them. I use them for storing my helmet and jacket. When I go someplace, I can just toss them in there. And I, 99% of the time, am riding alone. So it's just me and my gear weighing the bike down. For me, on this bike, the 2 settings that work for me, that put me in that correct range, are the 1 rider plus luggage and the 2 rider. Those put me at 31 and 38 millimeters of travel. Now at that point, it's up to rider preference, your riding conditions, which one you're going to choose. They're both technically in the range. Ideally, you'd want to be closer to the middle, but there is no option for that on the ES. I would want something between those 2 settings. For me, what gives me the better ride is on the smaller side of that scale at 31 millimeters using the 2 rider setting. But it's going to be up to you to measure, see where you're at, and if you're like me, stuck in between 2, ride it, test, and see which you like better. Now that you set your sag, and by the way, if you have to make major adjustments to sag on a bike, either front or rear, then go back and retest and reset the other end, because doing a large adjustment on one will slightly affect the other. On the ES, obviously, we don't have to worry about that. So we can jump right into doing our rebound dampening, which is controlled on the system through the soft, standard, and hard settings. We have a total of 7 times 3, that's 21 different settings. That's not bad. I like having more options. There is only going to be one correct option, and that is setting it for the bike itself. Now this is another thing where if you're a big guy like me, you can certainly easily do it yourself. Just be very careful. Don't drop the bike. Rule number 1. You may enlist the help of someone else to help steady the bike, or 2 people, or a front wheel chock, whatever you have to do. What we're going to do is take it up off the side stand, hold the front brake. We're going to lift back on the suspension and push down as hard as we can, and what we're looking at is the bounce rate and where the front suspension is going to settle. Ideally, we want it to come up when we lift, push down as far as we can get it, and then take tension off the bars and let it rebound completely on its own. You don't want to hold pressure and control it moving. You need to see what it does on its own. So once we push it all the way down and let off, we then want to see it come back up, top out a little bit, and settle back down. And that's it. No more than that. If it bounces any more than that, it's too soft. If it comes right back up and just stops, it's too hard. You need to find that point in between. This is going to change depending on the age of the bike, because, or more specifically, the age of the front fork oil. It will get more viscous as it ages. There are over 20,000 miles on this bike, so what you might find is over time, your correct setting is going to creep up a little bit until you change your oil, and then it's going to reset. So when this bike was newer, it definitely felt different at the same rebound setting on the controls. Now I'm going to start with it completely hard. This is hard plus 3, the firmest that the bike will let it go. And we're going to look at the way the suspension bounces. Take the bike up, balance it on your hip. I have complete control of it. Don't tip it that way. Keep control on the bars. Keep your front brake on. Ease into it if you've never done this before. You lift up. We're going to push all the way down, and then still holding the bars but not holding the bike down, watch how it bounces. Again, if you want to enlist the help of somebody to sit down there and actually watch and tell you what it's doing, if you can't look down the forks easily and tell yourself, that's a real easy way to do it. So this is all the way hard. I already know this is too hard. We're not going to see much bounce action. And it also bounces a little bit too slow. On the street, this is going to cause improper contact between the tire and the road. So now let's go to the other extreme, and we're going to go all the way soft, -3. So now we're as soft and squishy as the suspension will get. And what we should see now is more bouncing, and it's probably going to travel a little bit faster. It's a subtle difference. Don't expect it to be completely obvious. Test on the extremes and get it in your mind what you're looking for, then start dialing it in. So here's all the way soft. Again, same test, up, down all the way, relaxing. I had 2.5, maybe 3 bounces there before it settled and stopped. So let's find where our setting is in between. I'm going to go to standard 0, the neutral, the way it's delivered from the factory. Okay, now it's completely in the center. Let's see where we're at now. One and a half, maybe 2 bounces. It's still a little on the soft side. So I've already gone through this, and I know that at this time, with this amount of miles and my bike, hard -2 right now gives me a nice neutral setting. So I'm going to go to that and show you the difference. And this will give us a nice down, back up, down a little bit, settle, just what we're looking for. And there we go. So again, if you're going to do that, make sure you have good control of the bike. This is a heavy, top-heavy beast. Get somebody or some buddies to help you if you want to do this. But it's very easy to do yourself. As your fork oil ages, you're going to want to redo it, and here's why. What you're looking at here is the rear tire. Obviously that is forward on the bike, and this is after running about 1,200 miles on soft -3. I was just out for a leisurely trip, and I loved floating down the road with a nice cushy ride. That's exactly what the ES system is designed to do, give you that option. However, the downside is coming off your correct rebound setting eats up your tires. And it eats it up right here on your tread. What I have is a very pronounced difference from the front to the back edges of the tread. The front edges are chamfered way down, and the rear edges are rolled up. We do not have a smooth, contiguous tire whatsoever. It's like huge scalloping of the tire. It's just eating away at this tire's life. And that's what happens when you get away from your rebound correct settings. And it can go the opposite way too. You can't really tell, as far as I know, if you're under or over dampened. You have to retest and then check your tires. I know in my case I was severely under dampened because that's what I was purposely running. I didn't intend to ruin the tires like this. These aren't completely gone, but they would have been in just another maybe 2,000 miles, if that, if I had not stopped running it so under dampened. So that's why it's very critical that you correctly set, and at least most of the time run the correct dampening settings for your bike. Same thing happens on the front. And of course, again, the big ES limitation, front and rear are linked. We have no separate dampening controls for the rear. Like I said, you have to pick one or the other in some of these cases with the ES, and the other is going to be what it's going to be. So the rear is what it is, our front is set correctly, and that's the way I choose to ride it. Now that all being said, do I like the ES system? Absolutely, I love it. It is very convenient. I love being able to soften it, yes, way out of the correct setting when I'm doing a long trip and having a nice comfy ride down the freeway. That's exactly what it's designed to do. I love being able to put it back into a harder setting for when I want some spirited riding and having that proper dialed in control. That's exactly what the system is for. No screwdrivers needed, no disassembly of anything needed. I love being able to throw on a passenger or change my luggage capacity, and at the press of a button have things at least better adjusted for that. Is it absolutely correctly adjusted for that? Nope, it never will be. But in order to do that, you need a bike with third-party suspension, and you need a lot more time to physically make changes every time you want to make a change for your riding conditions. So I still love the ES system, but just be aware of its limitations and, more importantly, its comparison to a real properly dialed in bike. I'll have a much more detailed video on how to actually dial in your suspension a little bit later on my new bike, which has completely adjustable suspension front and rear. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.